And welcome to the April 16th, 2026 meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. The purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in the city. The Ann Arbor Renters Commission is of 2 voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council, 2 non-voting City Council liaisons, 2 non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative to the University of Michigan Student Legal Services. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, you'll be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone, depending on your method of access to this meeting. To be called on to speak, callers must press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature of viewing through the web link a2gov.org/renterscommission-meeting. You will then be called upon by city staff one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by username if available to those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments. City staff will indicate when callers have 30 seconds left of their 3-minute comment period. After 3 minutes, you'll be placed on mute so that we can proceed to the next speaker. Moving on to roll call. Commissioner Else?
I am here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Droppelman is absent tonight. Commissioner Chen?
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Councilmember Adina?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Councilmember Harrison?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Pitts?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Liao is absent tonight. Commissioner Larsenes?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Pace?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. I'm Commissioner Ratcliffe, and I'm here in Ann Arbor. Commissioner Rasuli?
Here in Detroit.
All right, but normally in Ann Arbor, right?
Normally in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on from roll call, we'll move to the approval of the agenda. Is there anyone who will move to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll motion to approve. Oh,
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Are there any changes that need to be made? Then we'll move on to the vote. Please unmute and say aye if you approve the agenda.
Aye.
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 Thank
Aye.
you. Thanks. If you're opposed, please unmute and say no. All right, then the agenda is approved. Moving on to approving of the minutes from the March meeting. Is there anyone who will move the minutes?
A motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
All right, thank you. Is there anything in the agenda, in the minutes that need to be fixed? All right, then we'll go ahead and move on to the vote. All those in favor of approving the March minutes, please unmute and say aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed, please unmute and say no. All right, then the March minutes were approved, and we'll go ahead and move on to the first general public comment. I don't see anyone in the waiting room, but
Yeah, it looks like there's no attendees except who we're expecting to present, so we can close public comment.
okay, great. I don't know how this is working. Are they presenting at the same time, Kristen, or is it separate?
I'll move them both in. I expect maybe like a little bit of both. I forwarded them both the questions that were provided, and so I don't know if they've coordinated on response or anything like that, but we can see.
Okay, then I'll just go ahead and introduce the speakers for tonight. It's Pete Held, who's from the city of Ann Arbor, with is it building inspection and rental services. I never get the name right. And is it the fire marshal or the fire chief?
Mike Kennedy,
Mike
Fire
Kennedy.
Chief.
Fire chief. Thank you. Thank you both for coming, and
You're welcome.
thank you for everything that you guys do for us who are renters in the city.
Will either of you need to share your screen?
I don't have a presentation.
Okay.
No, I have no slides.
Okay. So I sent over the questions that I think Rosanita and Hannah provided. If there's no formal presentation, that's totally fine. I know that you guys had, or the Renters Commission, that you had questions, mostly about kind of the responsibilities between tenants and renters as it relates to fire stuff. And then also Rosanita, or maybe Hannah, I can't remember who, had really good kind of like policy and budget questions about resources and stuff like that. So kind of hand it over to Mike and Pete.
Okay, I don't have a comprehensive list anymore. I've done some work to address some of the tenant-related questions. And Mike, I suppose you will then work on the fire-related questions. And there's a little of overlap, but I guess I'll just get started. I'll go ahead and start with the question regarding some consultant contract for EnerGov that indicates that the Renters Commission's asked multiple times to give input on Stream and its user interface. At a recent City Council meeting, a consulting contract was approved for a company to look at processes for developers. Does that process include looking at Stream, which is where permits, occupancy licenses, and inspection information is found? And if so, will the Renters Commission be a part of the stakeholder group that's scheduled to speak with the consultant? Well, the shorter part of the answer is that the consulting contract is going to be evaluating the entire system, internal workflow, Stream interface as it relates to the application, submission, and inspection activity, but it's not going to go into inspection reports. The content available to search online is also not within the scope of this contract. So I would encourage you to continue to reach out to the management of building and rental with your concerns. So that's, if you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to break in. The next question was, as of right now, court case results are not found in Stream. If a tenant takes a landlord to court and wins, for example, is there a way for that information to also be in Stream so that prospective tenants don't have to look at multiple government sites to find information about prospective landlords? The courts operate obviously independently of city government, and when it comes to eviction proceedings, we are often unable or unaware of them. With court case reporting, there is case search, as you're probably familiar with, on a tool on the 15th District Court website. And I don't believe that the city of Ann Arbor will be accurately able to convey those details over any search tool. But also code cases are not public facing. So when the Renters Commission does request some information regarding code cases, they have to go through a vetting process to protect privacy of usually the resident. So it's kind of similar to a FOIA request in that regard. And I know that people need to have details to know what's going on. We have been able to provide some detail upon request as to the effectiveness of certain ordinances. I'm happy to do that in the future, continue to work with you on that. I'm going to take a quick break and ask if there are any questions at this point. I see a hand up.
Yeah, my question is regarding violation data in stream. I understand the incentive to keep the entire complaint or violation file private for the tenant's privacy. Um, But for situations where there is some sort of enforcement action taken, would it be possible to include any data about that in stream, even just like the date that it happened? For instance, a few years ago, my apartment was deemed to be uninhabitable and I had to move out abruptly, and there's no evidence of that in stream. Um,
Mhm.
I think extreme situations like that would definitely warrant I don't know, public availability of that information. Um, and yeah, I understand maybe you don't need to put like all the information easily available in stream, but even just some sort of line item saying like what the violation was, what action was taken. Is that something that's feasible with the stream database, or would that need to be a completely different dashboard?
Okay, so I understand what you're saying, and I just want to recap. There are public inspection records for all inspections, for all permits, and all regular rental compliance inspections, and those are currently public facing, and all the details that pertain to those are available to the public. But in certain cases, such as perhaps what you faced, there are what they call code case complaints, and those are kept behind the wall, so to speak. Whether or not those can be made public in any way, I've been told that no, they can't for privacy reasons. Privacy code cases like that can be renters, they can be single family homeowners, they can involve domestic situations, they can involve a lot of information that it's perhaps important to it, not in all cases, but in some cases to protect individuals.
Yeah, I had a bit of a follow-up on that, I guess.
Go
Um,
ahead.
Actually, I'll let Sheila, you could go ahead.
Sure. I had a question along the similar lines, which is I know that in other cities, sometimes larger cities, there's a way to access the red tagged data or the condemned status data of residential buildings. This was something I tried to FOIA for, and I believe I got some basic information, but similarly, I think the city cited privacy violations as to why they couldn't share. I guess I'm wondering if there's a way to share information about which buildings or which landlords or what the general causes were of code violations, just so we can see if there's a pattern in the city, whether it's as a result of mold or structural issues. I guess I'm just wondering how to make that information more transparent while respecting the privacy of the tenants themselves.
Yeah, I'm on board with that, but I feel, that the Building and Rental Services Department can deliver the data to the clerk's office as they prepare for a FOIA. What happens after that point is out of the control of our department. I also would say that that's a management question, and I'm an inspector, not a manager. I want to make that point, but to the degree that you need specific information, it helps to get it to the Renters Commission. I suppose your interest is more to get it to the public. So it's still a problem. I don't see a resolution.
I see. Is that
from-
information that your department does collect?
Yeah,
Which is-
everything that we do is collected and documented for obvious reasons.
It's, pardon me if I'm misunderstanding, but it's sounding to me as though it's a legal issue but is it a legal issue that could be partially resolved by an act of council saying that, like de-identified information could be shared under certain, like for, code X, Y, and Z, ones that don't have to do with um, a domestic violence situation, but ones that more so have to do with mold or like that has to do with a specific structural habitability kind of situation.
That's a good question, and I am not a lawyer, so I can't help you.
I think we have one here somewhere, but in the waiting room, but it's sounding like it's more like that than, and that we need to ask them and not you. Is that what we're?
Well, I think I've given you the information I, in my capacity, can provide, but
Right.
I also think it's still outlined as a problem and a concern, and I'm willing to work with Kristen and John, I guess, both to try to get some information.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank
It's you don't want to end up someplace as a renter where it had year after year after year of certain issues that are code enforcement issues that just aren't listed when you go to do your research on an apartment. So thank you.
Okay, I see no other hands up right now. The next question I will probably ask for Chief Kennedy's help a little bit. The question is, the City of Ann Arbor, Chapter 105 does not require, the question is, are fire extinguishers required in rentals that are zoned as single-family homes? And the answer is, the City of Ann Arbor, Chapter 105 does not require fire extinguishers to be provided by landlords. Chief Kennedy, what's the philosophy behind fire extinguishers? I've heard it said that from other fire personnel that the philosophy is that we don't want untrained personnel to try to operate equipment that they haven't versed themselves on. We want them to leave the site, call 911 as soon as possible for their safety. Is that true?
So I guess to circle back and answer the question, just to confirm with what Pete said about a single family residence that is a rental is not required to have a fire extinguisher. A multifamily does, but those would be fire extinguishers in public areas such as hallways or a shared hallway or a stairwell. So just to kind of provide some detail on that. The fire, so there's kind of two things that dictate this area that we're talking about. The city has adopted the 2021 International Fire Code, and so that is what mainly applies for residential type occupancies or other occupancies that the fire department inspects. For rentals, what mainly applies is what Pete had talked about is in the Code of Ordinances, where there's a lot of carve outs that the city can do some above and beyond items, and that's what's in that Code of Ordinances that aren't covered in the International Fire Code, and that would be for rentals. To speak to the fire extinguisher question, the use of fire extinguishers is very dependent on the occupant. If there is a adult person that is doesn't have any, let's say, mobility impairments, isn't impaired in any way, their ability, if they have been shown how to use a fire extinguisher, if they know how to use it and they can get to it quickly, that's a good idea. For somebody that may have mobility impairment, somebody that is maybe under the influence, exactly as Pete said. We want them to get out as quick as possible. Senior residents, we want them to get out as quick as possible. Those extinguishers are heavy. They can be difficult to manipulate. You need both hands with that. So the focus is always on evacuation. The other part of that too is it's always it increases the level of risk if somebody has to go get an extinguisher, then come back. So you went from an area of safety to an area that is on fire. You were safe, stay safe. So there's there's a lot of kind of if-thens regarding fire extinguisher use. For adult people, that if you can have a extinguisher in your house that is readily available, the majority of fires start in kitchens. That is nationally, and that is in the city of Ann Arbor, and it's not even close. The vast majority of our fires start in the kitchen. So having, renter or not, having a extinguisher in the kitchen is a good idea. Now, there's a difference between good idea versus what we legally compel a owner to provide for a renter. Those are two different things. Just as in for if somebody owns their house independently, we have no legal enforcement for them to say, thou shall have a fire extinguisher. It's a good idea, but it's not required. So I know I've gone on for a second. I'm happy to, there's questions on that. Jordan?
Chief Kennedy, can you specify, you said multi-unit buildings, that I don't think that is blanket, and maybe Pete needs to chime in too, per city code. It's not all multi-family units. Can we clarify the code as it is written in terms of where fire extinguishers are required and where they are not, so that renters can understand what they should expect in their building, please?
Well, let's define what a multifamily unit is. Under the building code, it's a 3 or more units. So a duplex or a single family are not considered multifamily. In the last 25 years or even longer, for all new construction, multifamily buildings are suppressed. They have fire suppression, they have sprinkler systems. For older multifamily structures, Mike, you could chime in, but the fire extinguishers are used. They are inspected by a third-party inspector. They are tagged on a yearly basis, and every rental inspection does require that the inspector review those, to make sure that they are all tagged.
Yep, Pete knocked it out of the park.
Okay, thanks.
So you're saying any building with 3 or more units should have fire extinguishers. How many and how is that all determined? Do you get what I'm saying?
Fire extinguishers or suppression. So what's the difference? What's fire suppression and what's fire extinguishers, and when are either required in multifamily?
Well, so fire suppression are sprinklers, and as Pete mentioned, that's for newer construction. The last early 2000s, late 90s, I think, is that when that kind of kicked in. So sprinklers are a totally different thing. That's you just kind of see that metal appliance that either sticks out of the ceiling or sticks out of a wall. Yep, John, you've got them in your office. So that's that's the highest level of fire protection. If I could wave a magic wand and have fully suppressed buildings in the city of Ann Arbor, that would be outstanding. Fire sprinklers are intended to give occupants time to evacuate and for us to get time to get there. They're not intended for total fire extinguishment. They're intended to keep the fire in check until the fire department can arrive. And that's a sprinkler system. Fire extinguishers are obviously, I think everyone hopefully knows what a fire extinguisher is. Red. It's got some sort of nozzle assembly to it. The majority of fire extinguishers are called a multi-use dry chemical extinguisher. Fires are rated through letters A, B, C, A being ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, plastic, B is flammable liquids, and C is energized electrical equipment. So basically everything that you'd find in most homes. So If we've got a cooking fire, well, that's going to be Class B. That's going to be a flammable liquid. You obviously have the electrical component of the appliance. So that dry chemical extinguisher is appropriate for that application. I'll do a quick plug. We have our city police and fire public safety open house coming up on Saturday, May 16th from 11 to 1, and that's on Fifth Ave. It's between City Hall and the fire station. And we've got the fire station opened up, and the reason I mentioned that is we will have our fire extinguisher trainer available. So you are able to actually practice using a fire extinguisher if you're able to join us on that Saturday. So I might have avoided that. Did I get that question okay, or?
Yeah, I guess I'll message Pete after, because that's not what has been enforced at inspections in terms of number of units with extinguishers, like in our actual experience. So just curious about that.
So it also gets into and Pete could talk probably more to this. It gets into if there's shared hallways
Gotcha.
and shared stairwells. So think of and the city's got dozens of these where it's an apartment building with a center core hallway, and then you've generally got apartments on each side. By code, there'll have to be an extinguisher on each one of those floors. That's different than, let's say, like off-campus student housing, where you've got kind of it's one building, but it's three independent things that were kind of cobbled together over the years. Those are two different things. That second example, and Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, that wouldn't trigger a fire extinguisher in each of those occupancies.
Okay.
That is correct, Chief
That's
Kennedy.
helpful.
Since they already have 2 exit points per unit, you won't see fire extinguishers in those units.
Okay, thanks. I just didn't want renters leaving this meeting thinking my building has 3 units. I should absolutely have extinguishers, because that's not actually the case.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Good question.
It's very dependent on the layout and geometry of the building. And that's why it's always tough sometimes it's difficult for us to give broad answers, because a lot of it depends on the specifics. So thank you.
See no other questions. I think we can jump to the next question. There are hands up. Go right ahead, either Kimberly or Sheila.
This is Kimberly. Thank you. I have a question about the date. You said there's a training for the fire extinguishers. You said that's May 16th. And it's
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the police and fire do an annual public safety open house annually. It's Saturday, May 16th from 11 to 1. And that's, I think, been on both the police and fire social media channels, and pretty sure it's posted on the city events calendar. But that's just an opportunity. We actually have a propane trainer where people can use that. So just wanted to offer that.
And I have this weird question. So I have a fire extinguisher, and that was the thing. I don't know how to use it, so that'll be great. If I don't know if it's still good or not, is that the day to bring it to you guys to have you look at it, or is there a place to take them to see if they're still good? I mean, I never used it.
Yeah, so a little bit of a complicated question. So we as the fire department do not inspect extinguishers to determine if they're functional. So like when our fire inspectors go out to do a building inspection, or when Pete's rental inspectors go out to do a building inspection, we will verify the mounting, the location, the accessibility of it. We're certainly qualified to do that. And then for extinguishers that are required to be there by code, they are required to be inspected annually, and there'll be a service tag on that extinguisher. So, hang on just a second. Sorry about that. All right. We got props. Okay. So for code required extinguishers, there's going to be a tag that's required to be on there. And for the ones that you have in your home, Like if you were to buy one at Home Depot or Target or anywhere else, they're going to come with an initial like kind of tag on them, but you're not required to have them inspected annually. The what is recommended that annually you just simply take the extinguisher and turn it upside down because there's powder inside there, and after a long time, the powder can settle at the bottom. Outside of that, as long as your extinguisher, you'll see the gauge, and as long as it's in the green, it's good to go.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
some people will say, I've had this extinguisher since the 80s. It's probably a good idea to get to recycle that. It's not a hard and fast, but a general rule of thumb is 10 years. 10 years for smoke detectors, 10 years for fire extinguishers. There are companies, Certisite is one that does it locally, and I'm not endorsing them. They're just a company that is in Ann Arbor that does refill extinguishers and will certify them. For residential use, if you're just going to buy one on your own, it's honestly cheaper to buy a new one than to get it recertified. You can sometimes for hazardous waste disposal, sometimes they will take extinguishers, sometimes they won't. It kind of depends on who's running it. The fire extinguisher companies like that Certisite that I mentioned, they will recycle them, but there's usually like a drop-off fee. It's usually like 10 or 15 bucks. So there's kind of a lot to that. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, because that was going to be my last question. Like, what do I do with it if I want to get rid of it? Because, yeah.
Yep. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And Sheila, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. And maybe this will already be answered later on, but I had tenants reach out to me from Island Drive. I believe in June of 2025, they had a series of fires. I think it was 2 fires for these tenants. That fire affected their unit. They ultimately were forced to move. I think one of them might have been electrical related, and another one was related to like an animal's nest in like a kitchen vent or something like that. And so I guess I'm wondering what sort of inspections happen to prevent fires like that. Um, is that involved in, general inspection? Is there something that tenants can do? Is there something that landlords can do?
So the one involved in the animal's nest, that's not anything that a rental inspector would do, or because that was literally the like think kitchen hood on a oven stove unit. So I forget the particular animal. Usually birds are the culprit, but for that one I want to say squirrels. But don't I know it was an animal. The specific animal I'm struggling with. There's not really a way. Probably what you would notice is that it's no longer pulling the smoke or steam is probably going to be the way that you're going to detect that. So like a commercial hood occupancy, like you go to a restaurant, they've got these big commercial hoods. They're required to be cleaned and inspected on a regular interval. There's no such interval inspection or certification for apartments for that. So that's kind of a tough one. Yeah, it's more probably when like if the fan quits working or it's not working as well, that's probably a sign that there's something wrong. But there's really not a process for us to like proactively go out and inspect those.
So Sheila, also, I just wanted to give you an update on that incident on those 2 fires. The fire marshal did require the apartment management to address that by getting recommendations from a licensed mechanical contractor. The bird flap, the flap that exists in these residential, some of them vent fans, was not closing all the way. So they did hire this company to put some kind of a screen or grid that prevents animal infiltration. And I went with the other dangerous building inspector, Irv Johnson, on the coldest day of the winter with about 12 inches of snow, and inspected every single one of them from the outside. As far as interior inspections, every apartment is that has a fan is the operation of that fan is checked by a rental inspector. But those inspections, of course, are 2.5 or 3.5 year intervals. So that's my 2 cents I was going to add to that.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the inspections you did during the blizzard.
Oh, no problem. It comes with the territory.
Do you feel like the inspections, the 3 years, for interior and then the current inspections for exterior, do you feel like those are sufficient? Do you feel like maybe there's more than is needed, maybe less?
Well, there are 2 different standards applied to properties. There's an extra 12 months added on for properties that have achieved status where their inspection results are high. They passed most everything. But for most apartment complexes, that leaves it at a 2.5 year interval. One thing I really admire about the city of Ann Arbor's inspection rental program is that we go into 100% of the units, which is different from most municipalities. Some municipalities don't even have an inspection program, but they're picking them up now, even the smaller ones. But most of them outside of the city of Ann Arbor do a percentage ratio. So that's important to note. We did increase through council the number of rental staff by 3.5 to 4 persons. We're now up to 10, I think, regular rental inspectors. And so we'll be able to maintain the clip, that interval, even with the additional units we have coming online. So those are important factors. I also wanted to mention, I checked the most widely adopted standard for rental inspection, which is the International Property Maintenance Code. And that also is similar in that there are no requirements for a vent fan inspection. The practicality of it perhaps weighs into that. And there were a couple of other questions that were delivered to us. If there are no other hands raised, I'll move on to one that's pretty easy to answer, but an important one. If a tenant has concerns about the efficacy of their unit's fire alarm system, should they contact rental housing services or the fire department? And to that, I would say both or either. We oftentimes get complaints, especially from parents who are concerned out of state, and we work together on those. The jurisdiction and the actual inspection of those alarms and suppression systems, that's done by third-party inspection companies, and reports are given to the rental inspector at the time of inspection. So we as rental inspectors ensure that there has been a professional company that's certified to do this work, that has looked into and maintained the alarm and suppression systems. The age of the building has something to do with whether or not they're suppressed and have alarms, but strangely enough, newer buildings oftentimes have quite a few problems with alarms. It's not always age related of construction. If you have anything else to add to that, Chief Kennedy, feel free.
No, I wouldn't. You covered it. we're going to work hand in glove in terms of with building if an issue is brought to either one of us. And a lot of the times it's we're not waiting for complaints. If the fire department's going on excessive alarms, we're going to be reaching out with building and reaching out with that building owner to get that addressed because that's a burden for us and the occupants. So a lot of people will kind of call us and hey, why isn't anyone doing anything? And we generally have already been working to address that long before that complaint came in. So we're not reactive for complaints for systemic issues. So
I just have a quick question. I'm not saying that there are bad cooks out there, but sometimes, the in-unit alarm will go off quite a few times. At what point when that happens, should should that in-unit fire alarm, the one you just buy at Ace Hardware or something, when should when should that be replaced? If it's like I said, not saying someone's a bad cook, but if it's going off a lot, then yeah, when should that be replaced?
the manufacturer recommendations for smoke detectors is 10 years. If the unit is like has visual, so like after a fire, like if somebody were to have a fire and there were to be smoke and especially like soot that you could wipe off of a wall, that's going to contaminate those smoke detectors. So they would need to get replaced at that point. Um, Outside of that, we recommend generally annually is fine, taking some canned air and spraying out a smoke detector, and that's kind of for dust or some other stuff. But generally, from a visual inspection, if as long as there's not like soot on them, they really are intended to have that repeated activation and then be able to reset. Now, sometimes, and generally, if they're not working, they'll fail in a on mode. So you can't get after you fan it and you can't get it to reset, you'll have to take it down, and at that point you might have to throw that detector out and get a new one. But they are designed for that kind of on and off repeated activation for the scenario you mentioned. So
I think one type of smoke alarm that works a little better closer to kitchens is a photoelectric smoke detector,
yep.
as opposed to the standard ionization. And now they're making some that have both.
Yeah.
And if you want any more information about that, feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to provide it.
Thanks. Also, if, say, you have a resident who is deaf, is the landlord required to buy a specialized alarm, smoke alarm for that resident?
Under the ADA, it would be a requirement, but it's not a requirement through the city code. So 503 is it accommodation letter would be used to to request such an occupation accommodation.
I see Dan's iPad. Sorry, that's all I see on there. So
Yes, thank you.
okay.
I have questions about the not so relevant to this topic, but I was looking at the website. You have 20 vehicle fires last year in 2025. So I'm just curious, what is the reasons for the vehicle fire? I mean, where did it happen? So that when is it parked in the residence and charged, or on the road, or people smoke in the car, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, so for vehicle fires, last year we actually did not have any electric vehicle fires. So that number that was reported, none of those were. I should
Oh,
clarify that.
30, yes, 30 vehicle
Yeah.
fires.
So to clarify, there were a couple of EVs. I want to say there were 3 or 4 EVs, but none of them involved the battery. It was some other component. I think 1 or 2 of them, it was a charger issue, and the charger created an issue. The vast majority of our vehicle fires are internal combustion engines, and it's pretty well split. Some are parked, some are driving down the road. But the vast majority are there's some sort of electrical or mechanical. The other part of it too is we generally don't do a lot of forensic investigation for vehicle fires just because of the amount of destruction. Anytime a vehicle is involved in fire, the insurance company's going to total it. So we're not, it really would take a lot of forensic analysis to really figure out if it was electrical or mechanical or what exactly did it. The vast majority start in the engine compartment area, but us being able to determine exactly what it was, there's just not that investment with that. Now, if there are signs that it was an incendiary fire, that's another story. Fortunately, in Ann Arbor, we experienced very little of that. So,
Thank you.
no, are there, just to kind of maybe wrap up with Pete, I know there are some other kind of more fire department specific questions I'm happy to get to, but are there other maybe of like kind of the fire inspection rent? Because and just to clarify on for rental units, the rental inspectors inspect kind of the fire side of things. So we don't send fire inspectors separately. Rental will inspect those fire safety type things. So there's a bit of crossover there, or rental handles that, I guess, probably for the fire department's a better way to describe that. So
We work hand in glove. When there are questions, we oftentimes will contact the fire marshal and look for interpretation. But we do collect all the data for the suppression and alarm systems if they exist upon inspection. That is a requirement for the certificate of rental occupancy.
So are there any questions for Pete?
I had one last question. I think it was the last one on the Excel or whatever Google Sheet thing that we submitted. It's more broad, and this could be for both of you, but do you see any room for improvement in the Chapter 105 Housing Code that could improve maintenance standards to further prevent fires in rental units?
In terms of fire prevention, I think it's difficult to come up with a better idea. We're pretty thorough. No one, it's a zero tolerance sort of state, yet you know that fires will happen. To the degree that there is room for improvement, we have, for example, added the carbon monoxide detector requirement in recent years, and over the years increased the number of smoke detectors and so forth. About 40% of what we look at involves fire protection. And to that end, I'm including looking at exit functionality, doors that self-close and latched, and things of that nature. But there will always be room for improvement to the code and for overall maintenance, and improvement to the housing stock. And just reiterate, we're working with a full inspection staff at this point in time, and this is the first time since almost when I started in 2019 in the rental side. So it's pretty exciting.
I have a quick follow-up about the carbon monoxide alarms. Is the general recommendation that if we hear the carbon monoxide alarm going off, should you just like get out of the house, call 911 immediately? I did have a friend in a Ann Arbor rental who the carbon monoxide alarm went off she had the foresight to go turn off the gas or like their heat system because that's what was causing it. And then they evacuated. But would you recommend that people just immediately get out of the building?
So, Pete, you want to
Go ahead.
answer?
Well, I just wanted to say that carbon monoxide alarms don't trip until they've sensed an excessive amount of carbon monoxide for a longer period of time. So it is a system that you'd want to react quickly to.
Yeah, it doesn't so a couple of things. It doesn't sorry. It doesn't require the reaction speed of a smoke detector. So it's not like it goes off and like just you need to get out now. Call 911. So if we get a carbon monoxide alarm without symptoms, so if somebody's like, "Hey, the carbon monoxide went off," but like no one's feeling ill, we don't drive lights and sirens. We send the closest fire unit, but they're not blazing down the streets, lights and sirens. So we'll generally get there in about 10 minutes is our non-emergency kind of time frame, kind of give or take. So we're not, do we need to go out and check it? Yes. Is it this like, it's not the same as a fire emergency. So just to kind of put that in perspective, unless there, so we generally don't want people to turn things off before we get there because that prevents us from determining what caused it. So that we have air monitors and we are able to check kind of the known culprits, water heaters, gas stoves, like anything that has combustion is likely going to do that. So we would really kind of prefer that people just kind of leave the home at that point because the other part is you're not really going to know. The occupant has no ability to determine what exactly was the cause of that. So, and in fact, our crews are probably going to go back and turn things back on to attempt to locate to determine what it is. Because if we get there and everything's off and the house is ventilated, well, we're going to go in there with our meter and it's going to read normal air readings and that kind of puts us at a deficit. So, but so to answer the question, the CO detector goes off, call 911, let them know what's going on. We will send a rig out there, and then if we find any readings, we will shut off whatever it is. Then we also call DT gas as a follow up. So we have this last winter dealt with a lot of landlords that had like central boilers that were really pumping out some really dangerous levels of carbon monoxide. So we did have a couple of close calls over this last winter, but there were working CO detectors. So, I mean, the system worked. CO detectors caught it. We went out and found it and determined that in several cases it was kind of central boilers were the culprits. So. So there were a couple other fire safety questions or kind of fire questions. Do you think the current false alarm fee is adequate for the fire department? So we review all of our fees across the city annually as part of our budget process. So the current fee is it's we review it with finance and that accommodates basically that staff time. The problem that we're dealing with is for especially a lot of the and I'll call them out, a lot of the new high-rise residential units, that $250 is not a you kind of like, what's the purpose of a fee? Is a purpose of a fee to recover costs, or is a purpose of a fee to adjust behavior? For most people that I guess that owner occupied units at $250, like that's not fun. That's not anything that somebody wants to pay. And so they're going to do what they can to avoid that. We have had several bad actors that we have repeatedly gone to try to get them to fix things. And they're just paying that $250 because economically that balance has made sense for them. And so those are active conversations that we're looking to address of, because at that point it's not a cost recovery issue for the fire department. It's a, we have to address behavior issue, and we have to address behavior issue by the owner. And it kind of gets into an, like, what does the escalation look like? At what point does that fee structure reset? So there's a lot of factors there. And unfortunately, or excuse me, fortunately, it's a very small group of locations that we deal with this, because the majority of them, I mean, that's $250. We go out there 4 times. I mean, that's adding up. For anyone, that's just money that's going out the window. But we have had a couple of bad actors that, I mean, I think there was one that they were close to $10,000 in false alarm fees, and they seemed okay with that, which kind of boggled my mind. But so that's something that's on our radar, and honestly, that's really picked up in the last 2 years. So that's going to be kind of a code of ordinance change. Work with Mr. Reiser. We're that's on the list. I can't give a timeline or anything with that, but we've recognized that we need additional tools. And again, it's not the majority, it's these very small bad actors that we need leverage to be able to get them to fix things. So,
Yeah,
was there,
I have a quick follow-up
yeah,
of that. Would you be able to have some sort of fine schedule where like the dollar amount of the fine would increase based on the number of false alarms per year? Like it's almost like tiered, like it goes up the
that's
more you have.
that's likely what we would do. And then, like, if you go a year without it, it drops off. Honestly, it does become a bit of an administrative burden for us to kind of track that of, like, this address, these fines. Again, it's not a lot of addresses, but we do always have to kind of consider that, what sort of burden does that place on us to kind of track that. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like, the first one would be X amount, and then it would escalate at some point. So, John?
Well, I see other hands up too, so
Oh,
I'll wait.
okay. All right. Sheila?
You can go ahead of me, John, because I might
So
want to
I'm
hear what
looking
you
at
have to say.
I'm looking at section 9114, false alarm. Are these because people are smoking or disabling them, or
No,
what's going wrong in the
these
field
are,
generally?
well, so without question, the majority of the fire alarms we get are because of cooking. So that, like, it's not even close. And to kind of go back to an earlier question on fire prevention, the majority of fires are because of some sort of occupant behavior, most likely cooking. A close second is candles, and kind of after that, it gets into smoking. So we want the building to be safe, but like the Island Drive one with the road, with the nest and the vent, or the electrical issue, those are actually quite rare. It's vast majority are cooking, and again, like, it's not even close. The cooking issues versus everything else, and that's an occupant, somebody, and a lot of the times, especially in the downtown area, we can pretty much set our watches that around 3-4 a.m. on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, as certain age people get back from the bar and go home and put frozen pizzas in their oven and forget to take the plastic off. Like, that is a very routine thing for us. And it smokes up the kitchen, and the fire alarm goes off. So, John, to your question, the vast majority are cooking incidents. Now, we do have a couple of buildings where we have identified that the system is need of repair, and the building owner, for whatever reason, is being unwilling to deal with that repair issue. And but that again, that's a very small number of those kind of bad actor locations that they know they have an issue with their fire alarm, and they're not doing that. Now, in partnership with John's office, we had a fraternity that was going down that exact same route. They had a fire alarm system that was absolutely not functional, and Pete and building were part of this, and we revoked their C of O. It got to the point where we were going there so much. We actually revoked the C of O, made them all, hey, you can no longer occupy this. And that finally was enough to get their actual national charter that owned that fraternity house to take action. Because of the high hazard of occupants that were there, college age males that are may or may not be in a state of sobriety, we were not going to mess around with that facility and a fire alarm that was not functional. I think we had close to 30 alarms in like a 30-day period, and they refused to fix it. And again, we revoked their C of O, which is a really significant legal option that we have that we don't take lightly, but they were just refusing to work with us, and that's where we landed with that. So we do have some options, but the other part too is when we do that, that places a huge burden on the occupants at that point that they can't be in their unit anymore. So there's this balance of life safety versus now we've created this huge burden for the occupants. But we also knew that with this fraternity, they're just going to pay for them all to be in hotels, which they did. So kind of a different story. So Sheila.
Yeah, I have a minor just clarifying question, and then I have a follow-up bit unrelated. When you were talking about these $10,000 in false alarm fees, is this the same unit over and over again that is reoffending in these larger complexes? Or is it multiple units at once that are just not up, their fire alarms
Yeah.
aren't up to code?
No, so to clarify, when I'm talking about these like an address,
Hmm.
it's the address and we've identified that it's a system. An individual unit is usually very easy to deal with. And a lot of these units, or excuse me, a lot of these locations tend to be older buildings and they can no longer get repair parts for their fire alarm system. So they're looking at a whole new system, and that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that tends to be, so that's one where Pete's exactly right that sometimes have a lot of problems with new buildings with issues, but then we also can have problems on the far opposite side where so an example of a bad actor, and they're gone, so it's easy for me to talk about them, is I think it's where the Legacy is right now on South Forest. That building was horrific. That was a building I think was built in the 20s. The fire alarm system had been updated like 50 years ago. We were constantly dealing with that, and that was one where I think they knew that they were going to sell it and demolish it, and that was a very, very problematic building for us. And they knew that the answer was going to be a brand new fire alarm system. And that fraternity, that's also what they dealt with. They had to put in a brand new fire alarm system. And I understand they're not cheap, but that's also the cost of doing business, especially for life safety systems. So did that answer your question, Sheila?
Yes, yes, it did. So I guess the fees need to be enough to where it makes sense compared to this hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's
And
the
that's a
issue.
huge difference from $250.
Yeah. So and yes, that's
Yeah,
yes, and again, I can count on one hand the amount annually that we deal with, but the problem is, though that small amount is having a really big impact on number one on the occupants because of alarms going off all the time and they're ignoring it, and it's causing us to continue to send resources there. So it's frustrating for everybody, but yeah, if you're just simply from an accounting perspective, it's a lot of those fire alarm responses are going to make up for that $100,000 fire alarm system.
I see. And then my larger question, maybe this is Mike or Ron, John, you can also answer. Um, Related to you were saying that tracking violations for these escalating fees would be very difficult. I know that the city is also looking into improving enforcement in other housing related areas, early leasing ordinance, the fee bans. That would also involve a similar level of this high, fee tracking. I wonder if the people here have a thought of if this needs to be its own department with new staff, or if budget can be allocated or directed toward rental inspection to track and fine, these fire-related code violations. If we, really bump the fees up to to get to where it's challenging hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, so I do want to clarify that it's we would have to identify a process for that just to kind of track that, which we don't have. And is that a full FTE? No. The struggle that I think across a lot of city departments is it's never just one thing. It's a lot of these little things that we kind of add to staff that eventually over time kind of avalanche. And so that's just something we always have to be careful with and want to make sure that, hey, if we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. So those are some of those processes. Now, I don't know that that's a whole city unit to do that. It might be a system that multiple departments can use that we have a lot of those throughout the enterprise. So I think some more discussion on that. I don't know that I've got a great answer tonight for that. I don't know if, John, you might have anything to add.
Well, you can't have these ridiculous fees that are beyond the cost of what it is to the city. You just can't. You can't. Now, if you're going to have a civil infraction, or if you're going to have a misdemeanor for a false alarm, I don't know that it's a false alarm if somebody falls asleep and their pizza starts burning and the smoke detector fire alarm goes off and the police respond. It's kind of, in one sense, it's working like it should, but so you'd want to make it commensurate with the cost, or you could do second offense, third offense, things like that. And do you who do you pursue in this? Is it the tenant who's maybe negligent for not doing what they're supposed to, or is it the landlord for because it happened in their building, or the property management company or the building owner?
Yeah, John, to clarify, the majority for ours, it would be clearly that we've identified that the alarm system is the issue. That this
Okay,
isn't
well,
that this isn't a tenant issue.
okay.
This
That's
is
good to know.
this is a system issue. And yeah, I know that there's from a legal like our ability to charge beyond what a cost of services creates a legal challenge there. So, and again, we haven't gone to the city attorney's office with this. This is just something that we've identified internally that we need some other sort of leverage, whatever that looks like, to try to compel folks to address these issues. So Hannah, did you have a?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is my last follow-up on the false alarm topic, but is any of that information publicly available? Like if I'm apartment hunting, I'd like to know if the property I'm about to move to had $10,000 of false alarm fines last year because, they weren't willing to get the system up to code.
We don't currently publish it. I'd have to check with the. Yeah, we don't currently publish it. And the sorry, I'm kind of trying to think through like we can run reports for addresses, but I don't know that we'd have a great ability to have like a dashboard that could kind of show that. I'd have to do some internal checking to see any feasibility with that. And I'd also probably want to talk with our city attorney's office because again, I mean, we're reporting facts. I mean, it's we responded to this location X number of times. It kind of becomes a bit of a public shaming, which I think is the point. But so I would want to number one, it's the pull of the information to have that, and then uh the display of that. The data's there. It's number one, it's pulling that data, and then number two, it's us displaying that data. So I'd have to do some follow-up on that. So and then there was just a couple of other questions that so one of which was a kind of an easy one with the East Side Fire Station at Platten here on Parkway. That's expected to go online. We're hoping September. So that's been a work in progress. They're the big issue that they're trying to do is get it enclosed. Once it's enclosed with paneling and glass, then they'll really be able to kind of dial in a hopeful move-in date for us. But we're still looking for that early September is kind of the tentative timeline for that one. And then for the high rise, just kind of the city's growing vertically. We have the most vertical growth of any city in the state right now. And at the budget workshop presentation to council in March, I want to say it was March 18th ish. I had presented to council asking for an additional fire company to address that. And it's not just for high-rise fires, but it's all of the demand that is included with those buildings, the fire alarms, the medicals, you have denser buildings, it's just going to require more service. And then when we do have a high-rise fire, a key with any fire, especially a high-rise fire, is being able to deploy as many staff as possible to get in front of it as quickly as possible. And a fire on the 10th floor is a very, very different thing than a single-family dwelling fire or even an apartment building. Single-family dwellings and apartment fires, that's kind of our bread and butter in Ann Arbor, along with most similar-sized cities. Those fires on those upper floors, that requires a whole different set of skills, whole different approach. And our reflex time is also challenging, not only just getting from the scene, but then getting up to the fire and doing action. For a house fire and apartment fire, our time from time on scene to us getting water on fire is usually 3 minutes tops. For high rise, it could be 20 minutes for us to actually get up there, get hose lines in place. And that's why those sprinklers are so key to keep the fire in check until we're able to get crews for final suppression. And then it's dealing with ventilation. So long story short, I know that was recorded. That's on CTN. It's also on the YouTube channel, kind of a more explanation. But we have done that request. The struggle for fire staffing is that in order for us to turn on a fire apparatus, we staff that with a minimum of 3 people. So for 24/7 operation, we have 3 shifts, so that's 9 people. And then obviously firefighters need time off. So in order to accommodate for that, that's actually 12 positions. So in order for me to have that one fire truck on 24/7, we need 12 people to do that. And that's basically, we have 3 shifts, so you assign 4 to a shift, 4 on duty to account for vacations and sick and everything else. And that's got a hefty price tag. That's about $1.7 million. So in recurring costs. So understand that there's a lot of competing budget interests for the city, but that has been put out there. So with that's something that I have been advocating for. Understanding the fiscal ask is significant for that. So I think that covered most of the questions that I had. I'm happy to answer any other questions that anyone else may have.
Likewise, thank you.
All right, just thank you for the questions. They were very good questions. Some very, very educated and well thought out questions. So I appreciate the time that went into those. And certainly happy to continue to answer any other sort of questions there. I just do really want to commend Pete and his group. They really do a phenomenal job with those rental inspections for keeping things safe with that. So
Thank you. And same goes to you as an Ann Arbor resident. I've had to use the services. So Ann Arbor Fire Department, it's something you can't take for granted. And before I sign off, I want to just let everyone know I really appreciate the work that you're doing on behalf of tenants. And thank you for your volunteer work here.
Thank you,
Thank you.
both for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank
This was really helpful and educational for us, and hopefully for people when it's posted onto the CTN YouTube channel. And I sent an email to Kristen asking if the event on May 16th could get emailed to the commissioners, and the Renters Commission also has a newsletter list or an email list. And so I asked if it could be put on that also, because I think that it would be really helpful for other renters in the city to, especially if there is a fire extinguisher, to learn how to do that and to learn more about the public safety services here in the city.
Yep. Welcome, everyone. And yeah, thank you very much for the time tonight, and thank you for your service on this commission. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then moving forward on the agenda, the next item is a discussion about Chapter 105, Section 8.530, with the lease agreements, the right to renew, and whatnot. An issue that had come up with the early leasing ordinance, and I spoke briefly about it at the last meeting. Gail couldn't be here, but she did send me an email, is that we have tenants, especially in some of the bigger buildings downtown, prospective tenants who are being told that they can sign a lease for a particular unit. So they're signing a lease for this unit, or they think it's a lease, I should say, for this unit, only to find out that the tenant who is currently occupying the unit has decided to renew. So it has to do with the right to renew ordinance, and then the person who wanted the unit thought they had a unit, now does not have a place to live, right? And they're panicking. They're also, and I think that's a huge problem, because it sounds like it's not being made clear that it's like a tentative offer. It's kind of sounding almost like a wait list without it being a wait list, and I don't know if they're accepting money or not. Hannah?
To clarify, is this one of those situations that we heard about where like a landlord will give a tenant a lease, the tenant signs it, sends it back to the landlord, but the landlord doesn't countersign it, so they think they have the unit, but then actually they renew it for the existing tenant, leaving the tenant that signed the lease like just confused?
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
There you go.
John?
So, you started talking about 8.530, but then you kind of morphed a little bit into 8.532 with respect to we've got wait lists. So this is kind of an amalgam. So for those of you that are fluent in Municode, you can pull up 8.530, and then the next one after that is 8.532. But with respect to 8.530, so it says under 8.530 parentheses 3. And then it says under E as in Edward. So it talks about, the landlord sends the lease, and the tenant must return the signed lease after 10 days. And then the landlord must countersign the lease for the successive within 10 days and immediately return the countersigned copy to the tenant. So they don't get to sit on it like a bird in the hand. And we have enforced that. So we have gotten complaints. I wish Pete were still here. So you don't get to do that.
Is
Well,
it
what's happening
10
though is
days or
that
30, just to clarify?
I'm sorry.
Is it 10 days or 30? I thought under the early leasing ordinance there was 30.
Well, so look at look at parent 3, tenant's acceptance of a landlord's offer. A landlord may not require sooner than 30 days the offer is sent. So the tenant has like 30 days to kind of sleep on it, think it over.
Right.
And then the landlord must present a lease agreement within 30 days of the tenant's written acceptance of the landlord's offer. So they make an offer, you accept, send me the lease. They got 30 days to do the lease. And then the tenant must sign it within 10 days, and then the landlord has 10 days. So there's like, it's 30 plus 30 plus 10 plus 10.
It's not a renewal.
Right, but
These are-
but that's not a renew, right? What's happening is I
Okay,
currently rent in this unit, right? And I'm
okay.
still deciding whether or not I want to stay. Meanwhile, Hannah has come and she's like to the property management companies like, hey, I need a place to live. And they're like, oh, well, so and so hasn't signed their lease yet. Here's a lease, like we have a unit. Here's a lease for you to sign. I am still within my 30-day period. And so I haven't signed yet. But meanwhile, Hannah has received a lease. She's signing this lease. The landlord, though, has not signed, countersigned her lease. Meanwhile, day
I understand
29
what you're saying
happens.
now.
I sign my lease, hand it in. The landlord then has to countersign my lease, and Hannah's left out in the dust.
So are
But Hannah
landlords
thought she had a unit.
doing this and trying to then accepting the best offer, the highest price, something like that?
No, they're having to. I mean, they have to take the person who was already in the unit, but they're having this. But
For
they're
new, I
having
mean
the
for new, of
second. Right, they have to take the person who's renewing if the
course.
person says it. But what they're doing is they're having the secondary person sign a lease. They're just not countersigning the lease. So the person they signed it, they think they're getting that unit only because I then send it in to renew, they don't have a unit. And that's happening in some of the downtown buildings.
Yeah, it's like
So
a weird
what?
version of a wait list.
Yes, it's a new version of the wait list.
Or it's an offer and acceptance under contract law. And I wish Gail were here on that.
And-
Because
But if it,
the
yeah,
landlord made an offer, correct?
Mhm.
but they didn't
And then
countersign. If we take a look at that same section, City Code Chapter 105, Section 8530, it says the landlord can't enter a unit to show to prospective tenants or lease to another tenant until 210 days into current lease period. That
correct.
210 days is 30 days following the 180 days by which
Right,
they begin that,
right.
offer to the current tenant. And so if they are making a lease offer within that 30-day period, that's before the 210 days, that would be a violation. Like that shouldn't be happening to begin with. So I would say that that's violating the early leasing ordinance.
Right. What Gail said is that tenants are being offered a lease, but not clearly notified that the lease is dependent on availability and whether or not the current tenants renew.
So they're essentially, the landlord is saying this isn't an executed lease, so it doesn't count. And I'm not sure. I mean, I had numerous residents of my own that this actually happened to this year, that then panicked and came back to me and said, do you have anything? Of course we didn't. So I had 3 groups that went through this. So it's escalating in number and scale. And so then this was like May 15th. These 3 groups were thinking they were going to get that house, had signed a lease, and then they have no house. So this is worse than any sort of wait list thing that has happened. I
No, I get it.
hear what everybody's saying about like it does seem like it fits the ordinance, but I think and yes, I wish Gail was here and I had planned to talk to her. We just kind of have kept missing each other, but that is even more severe. It's causing even more of a problem. And then in that whole meantime, I mean, the other thing is that then that group is strung up on that lease, right? So I don't know when they're executing them. Maybe they're waiting until they've sent out the lease offer to execute. That's one question. I think it was way earlier, though, at least for 2 of the groups I talked to in detail. So they're signing a lease maybe even back in December or January, thinking they've got a house and that they're just waiting until that date. Like the landlord is kind of pitching it as though I just have to wait till this date to sign the back end of it. They were not even informed about the possibility of the current group staying. Of course, I mean, we know right to renew, but it's pretty bad. And then what it caused, the kind of downstream thing is pretty significant in terms of then it's March 15, you're kind of late to the game and you were planning to live with these people. And in the meantime, you couldn't even really shop or engage in any sort of meaningful communication about a place that might be on a slightly different timeline because you're bound by a lease you signed. So my proposal would be, can we legislate that if landlords are making a leasing offer, landlords have to sign it first? And
Yeah. So
can we
I,
legislate that?
So I'm looking here. A landlord may not enter into an agreement to rent the lease premises to another tenant for 210 days. So are landlords kind of hedging their bets? Like, we know this guy, the current tenant, has the right to renew, but in case they don't, I want to have these three people come in, and then these three people. So it's not like you do it these three people, one, two, three, and then party four, five, six, because they can afford a little more and all that stuff. So that's why they're doing it. And so it's a byproduct potentially of the tenant's ability to stay there and a prospective tenant not knowing for sure whether they have it. So,
Well,
so, so
yeah,
I,
I think it's a
I hear
punishing.
what you're saying, and it's going to, right.
I think it's a punishing move. I think it's a like, I'm pissed about this early leasing ordinance and I'm going to behave in this way. And so it would be completely solved if we just said any lease that is sent out in Ann Arbor has to be sent out on good faith of the landlord. It has to be first signed to landlord, and the tenants can wrap it up. And the tenants have the 10 days or whatever to wrap it up. And to be honest, that's kind of, at least my experience, the default of Adobe. So on Adobe, when we email a group a lease, it already is signed by us and our company. So I'm confused as to like the hoops that people must be jumping through with these electronic legal signing services too. But I think we could just legislate that point, and it would prevent this, because it would bind, if landlord has signed it, it's an actual lease, and then they would have a lease out on a property that they can't actually lease because of the early leasing ordinance. So that, to me, and I'm totally open to others' feedback, that would be the like quick fix, to say any lease that is sent out in the city of Ann Arbor must be signed by the landlord, and a full lease that can be enacted at the tenant's request within the 10 days or whatever, however we would do that.
I'm wondering if we even need to change the language. I mean, this is maybe something we get Gail or Jim Shaftsma to look over, but or lease to another tenant. I'm wondering if that's like limited to like the contract being completed, or if even just providing a lease in and of itself is a violation, because I think it does go directly against the intent of the early leasing ordinance, and I wonder how important that is. Maybe it's clarifying interpretation, or if there's less work that we can do, the better.
I think that makes sense. I also, I guess, there yes, the law exists if we can make it so that, because the only people that are going to be upset about this and report it are the people that are going to end up on the back end, right? And still, I think all of us on this call would agree this is not what the ordinance meant, and this is not what we want people to be subject to. So I guess that would be my only like, does that solve the intent problem if it ends up working out for a handful of groups? They are not, but should it really be the case that then landlords can have uncountersigned floating leases for months on units, which is also just weird. Like, I can't understand it from a landlord perspective either. So that's challenging. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Councilmember
One of the
Regina?
things sorry.
Yeah, I guess I agree with everything that's being said, that this is clearly not the intent and also seems to be super bad faith. Um, in this circumstance, was there any other action? I mean, like normally when you sign a lease, that's the time when you might like have to put down a security deposit or anything like that. Was there anything like that that took place that where we could, get the landlord on, is this a situation where like there's implied consent or something like that, where the landlord has actually taken an action implying that they had a signature there where the tenant could then be do some damages?
In my cases that I know of, no, but Gail has certainly a much larger swath of folks, or even maybe tenants. I mean, I'm always telling folks, contact the tenants union and email renters commission. And all of the people I spoke to said, now we have no housing and we're really fearing retribution and we don't want to be vocal about it. And so I think that it's also it's also worth acknowledging that because of this power dynamic, speaking up about these things when they've already been vulnerable and already lost a house and are unhoused for next year at that moment become a little challenging. But no, there was no money exchanged in the three that I knew of. Yeah, good question.
So under, you know, under, 8530, which I think is where we'd want to put this, entry and leasing to another tenant for a subsequent period. Under B, it says a landlord may not enter into an agreement to another. So it maybe should say landlord may not extend an offer or enter into an agreement to rent it. So you can't even make an offer. So that would one way do it. And then you could add a C, any offer to a prospective or current tenant must be countersigned by the landlord within 10 days. Countersign and return within 10 days. So I think you could tweak 8/5/30 paren 5. But I'd want to talk to Gail about that. You know,
John, I guess I'm wondering, are you seeing violations of 8530 coming up for this upcoming year?
well, they come up from time to time, sure, but I don't know that we've gotten this one in particular. I sent an email to Greg and or Janet and Pete. Didn't Kristen? Are you online? Kristen Vanderlick, are you here?
What's up?
Wasn't there an inquiry to rental housing about how it's going on right to renew enforcement, and wasn't there a
What?
request for that?
I have to look. I think maybe it was a media inquiry sent to
Oh,
communications. Like communications may have
yeah, it
been
was.
like, is
It
this a
was.
FOIA or is this a question for the department? That happens
No,
all the time.
no, it was a student reporter.
Oh, I remember
That's what
now.
that's what it
I don't
was.
know what was decided, and
It was a
I'm not
student.
aware that a FOIA has come in.
No, it was a student reporter actually inquiring about the efficacy of this new ordinance that I forwarded to Greg and Jen and Pete.
Is there a way that we could, I don't know, I feel like this is a bit on the spot to discuss this, but is there a time maybe at a future meeting that you'd be willing to discuss enforcement and, what we've seen and what violations have cropped up?
Status report on 8/5/30. How many complaints? Where are they? And you could get maybe Greg Scrimger or Pete or whomever Alicia assigns to it, and then and then what you guys would know where things are falling between the cracks, possibly.
I think that would, I don't know if anybody else would be interested, but I think I would be very interested in hearing that.
Right. We do ask for, like every year, we do ask for and receive a report on ELO and other ordinances and complaints and all of that. Um, one of the, I think Hannah and I were discussing it earlier today. One of the issues is that a lot of people have problems, but they never actually file a complaint. And they do that for a variety of reasons. And so while the complaints are good, they don't it doesn't tell the whole picture of everything that's happening, unfortunately. It takes time, it takes documentation to lodge an official complaint. It also takes knowing exactly where to go. When you look at the city website, if you go to one page, it says contact Janet Farrell, and you go on another page, and it's kind of all these different types of complaint forms that you can fill out what the ordinance based on the ordinance. And so it can be kind of confusing for people also.
So it's funny you mentioned that. I got a text from Pete. Sorry, I signed off. It says that next week Courthouse Square is going to be inspected, but then he says, I think there also may be a little bit of confusion as to who the players are in the rental housing department. Maybe for the next meeting you can deliver an org chart because we have had so many new staff members to kind of find out who does what with respect to code violations, or if it's a early lease agreement, or if it's this new application fees, or if it's, so that might be something given all the hires they've had.
I think, yeah, that would be great. I'd also like to kind of mimic what Jordan was saying, which is that from the undergraduate students that I've spoken with, a lot of the lack of reporting is due to fear of retaliation. I think that they're under the belief that landlords, especially big landlords, communicate with each other. Big landlords happen to own a lot of property, and if you if they have a bad experience with one of the properties, maybe then they won't be able to rent from that landlord from all of their properties. And then it really limits the housing that's available to them. And so I guess maybe something that we can consider in the future is how to make tenants feel more comfortable in reporting either anonymously or, whatever it is that we brainstorm.
I think, I mean, it's just for some things, it can't be anonymous, like if it's the leasing issue, right? Because you have to actually have proof. Um, and we know that items are redacted, but if it's for like a particular unit, I mean, they could say that, well, we had a report that this is what's happening. But if I would like to know first, just in terms, it's so hard for ones that were actually reported. Is there a specific landlord where it's happening most frequently? Like, what's the distribution on these violations, right? Um, because that's becomes another issue unto itself, especially if you're like, well, it was at apartment complex A and apartment complex B, but they're both owned by the same by the same owner or run by the same property management company. Then I can 100% understand the person's fear of retaliation of, well, I complained about complex A, I'm applying for complex B, they know me now.
I wanted to add on to that a lot of landlords require references from previous apartments you live at. So if you're gonna like, I don't know, ruin your relationship with your current landlord because they're doing some sort of violation, it could affect your ability to move out and even find another apartment.
Going back to the 8530, I wonder if maybe this is a conversation that we can have during the working meeting. We can invite make sure that Gail is there, maybe invite Shafsma, and then have a discussion. Just because I know that leasing is ramping up right now. A lot of people are probably in this position at the moment.
Yeah, and I know we've been doing the second Thursday of the month at 5:30 for these meetings, but if we're gonna do like some sort of special meeting, I'm sure we could just schedule it at a different time if that would be more convenient for the people we're inviting.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, and I think it's a good idea. The other thing too is I don't know if it was mentioned there um, with the agenda. I'd had to go, but we had also had the issue that came up with the how it's how the fee is what's what is a fee or a utility, and I don't know if we actually I don't remember if we actually had a conclusion to that because of like if I have $35 a month for Xfinity or 45 for Xfinity, and then I renew my lease, there's an addendum to the lease or there isn't, but it's a renewal, and now I have to pay $70 a month for the internet provider of their choice. Or then is where does that fit in with with the fee ordinance? Is that something that needs to be changed? We had started discussing that, and I don't know if we need to just set aside an entire meeting where we just catch up on what's going on with all of the ordinances and talk about changes that possibly need to be made.
I
Um,
I would be very interested maybe making next meeting about the updates enforcement. I think that where Ann Arbor Tenants Union is slated to introduce right to repair, I think that would fit really well into that sort of theme also. Um, but I wonder if that would be enough time to discuss the utility question, if you think.
Kristen, next meeting, is it just AATU that's scheduled to give a presentation? Because OSI was giving one, but is that in June?
Give me a second to double check.
And I also just wanted to follow up. I know I was speaking with Kristen about the status of the right to organize. Since John is here right before John leaves, do we kind of have an idea of where that is at, when it might potentially receive feedback or approval? Oh, John, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I'm having to stand up because of cramp in my leg. So, I can have something for that on our next meeting. So, like, I suggest we focus on, are we going to do 8-5-30, which is the right to renew, and questions about that and tweaking that? Do we want to talk about 8-5-32 and what changes might be suggested? I will say that that doesn't go into effect until,
I think August.
yeah, that's right. As it's written, internet is a utility and therefore not a fee. So that's how that is. And so, can you reasonably avoid it? It's what the standard is on that ordinance. So
I think I would appreciate not for this meeting, but as part of that, some clarification. Like I didn't, looking at the timeline, like we don't have to start putting these fees on. So I had started doing some of our announcements with them, and I'm really curious as to what the expectation is of landlord. Like every Facebook post then has to have your thing, and then like fees in a long list. Is that what we're hoping? Like I'm trying to get. I know I kind of asked some of those questions, and then actually practically starting to do it. I think I'd like some clarity just on like what we're putting in there, what the city and what renters advocates are kind of expecting that to look like. Is it just on your website? Is it in the listing? Is it every time it's posted on Facebook or another listing service? So I'd appreciate more conversation about that too, if possible, but not today because it's late already.
That's why I asked Kristen about next meeting and what's on the agenda.
So I looked briefly and I only see OSI for June. I don't see something specific
Okay.
for May. But I typically have that in emails with you and with Hannah. So if either of you remember
Right.
otherwise, I can do some more digging.
I think Hannah said it was June. I thought it was May. I couldn't remember correctly, so yeah. Um, I think we're kind of moving forward a little bit to the next item, which is the plan for next meeting. And um, I think what I would like to do is really dig into the ordinances and what um, what, if anything, should be changed or recommendations for changes, and what the tenants union and landlords and us, what we're hearing, so that we can improve the ordinance so that it's following the ordinances so that they're following through on the intent and um, of the ordinances. So I'd like to have most of the meeting um, geared towards that. Sheila, how long do you think the right to repair um, would be?
I think we can go through it pretty quickly. I think we went through right to organize pretty fast. The thing that took longer was our like presentation overview of the organization. Um, I mean, we could drop 15 minutes on it, and then give the rest of the time.
Yes. Okay, especially if you can get a copy to
Mhm.
Kristen and then she can email it out to the
Yeah,
commission so that we can get it ahead of time. I
yeah,
think
I
that would
think that
also,
would cut it down.
okay. So then the updates on the ordinances, right to repair, and including in that update on the ordinances, the update on the right to organize
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, that I think that would be great. I have because I have a lot of tenants who are sending me questions about I think fees that are in these middle grounds and have to do with leasing and might be related to 8530, might be related to something else, and whether that's us emailing John or just dealing with it in the next meeting. I would love to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of this.
I think also if it's discussing it in the meeting also puts it into a different kind of public record. And so I think that it's a good idea to have that at the meeting. Um, I think if there are questions ahead of time, Kristen, can we do a document like we had like we do when we have a presenter come, so that way there can be a list of questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Um, and is there anything else that people want to see in the meeting for next month?
Do you want
Yep,
somebody from rental housing there to talk about how they do it? Because I don't get involved in these unless they come to me. Like I'm not the first line on these. They'll go to Janet or to Greg Scrimger or to Pete or somebody, then I get involved. So they might have more. Alicia might want to assign somebody or Greg, or you might want to email questions ahead of time like you did today, which is very helpful.
well, we're already going to be collecting questions, so I think that'll be
Okay.
good. Um, and that's, and then we were also talking about holding a work plan session and specifically having someone from their office come to talk with us about that. So, and that would be ahead of the meeting.
Okay.
All right, moving forward, we'll go to the reports from City Council.
I'm gonna go first because I got a jet. I have to take off. I actually don't have an update. So that's my update. But I don't know if Travis and he might mention something that yeah, I don't have an update right now. I just have to, I've got to take off. I'm sorry.
Thanks for staying in it. We're running over the normal time period.
No, it's been
Councilman,
very
thank,
informative.
thank you. Councilmember Adina, do you have any announcements?
Yeah, I can just briefly share, and this will not be news to Sheila because she was part of the meeting. I had conversation with Sheila and another member of the tenants union about both right to organize and right to counsel. I then continued that conversation, but the mayor was involved in that as well. I continued that conversation last week, I believe, with our city attorney. And so we're continuing to have those discussions and trying to move that forward as well. I know that that's been a topic here before. And so hoping to have kind of a more substantial update in the future. Also, John, I don't know if you were planning to talk at all about the update on Courthouse Square beyond what you've already brought up today, but I figured I could defer some of my time to you because I know that you shared an update with council or with a couple of us.
Yeah, either one of us. What I forget, you chime in on, please, and thank you. They've had some fires there, intentionally set fires. So Pete's been spending some time trying to get them up to code with respect to fire door, riser room, fire doors, access to the pipes and all that stuff. And um, they're trying to get them up to code because the doors that go into um, commercial buildings like that have to be fire rated. You just can't slap up a metal or a wood door. It's got to have so much foam in there to burn longer in the event of a fire. So Pete's working on that. Next week, the rental housing department is going to be inspecting all of the rooms. There are a lot of rooms. In the email to you, Travis, I said how many they are. And Pete said invariably there will be follow up that's needed, subsequent inspections when there are, when it's not up to code. So that I told Council Member Redina that I would email him that report once it's complete. It might be a while before it's complete because of the follow up that's needed. So Courthouse Square is get subject to that. They also have been installing cameras, security cameras throughout. Part of the problem is they have security during the day, but not at night. So not at night is, things happen at night sometimes. So that's why they've got more cameras to try to thwart often people who are from outside doing things inside that impact the quality of life for the residents. Um, Anything else that I said in your email to the council members, Travis?
Yeah, just that.
Council member Reed?
Yeah, you're fine. Just that it was 116 units total that are going to be inspected next week.
Well, starting next week.
Well,
It
it's
takes a
starting
while
next
to do
week.
that many.
Yep. And then I also know you mentioned that. I mean, this gets into a different level of detail, but I think follows up with kind of some of the challenges we've had with Courthouse Square as a landlord, around kind of you mentioned that the doors that they replaced, they didn't replace with the correct doors. They also didn't pull permits to replace those doors as they were
Right.
supposed to do. And it sounds like they're being given another week to comply with everything, to pull permits and to rectify the situation. But I guess I wanted to ask if what the next step will be if they don't do that, considering that we've had issues with them previously.
It would be a civil infraction issued, and Pete would demand a formal hearing, which at least I'd ask him to. That way, it has to go in front of a judge. So the city attorney will be there. Pete will be there. So it would be the issuance, enforcement in the courts.
Yeah, I just want to step in quickly, just because Ann Arbor Tenants Union works with the Courthouse Square Tenant Association. I was wondering if there's a way for us to be looped into, that email you're going to send out to Travis about the unit inspections, and if this ends up becoming a civil infraction, if there's a way to get the tenants involved to appear in court, even if it's just to kind of sit in and listen.
Yeah, the court thing would be about a not pulling a permit for a commercial door and not getting the right door. So Pete's going to say this is the wrong door and they didn't pull a permit. So I don't know that they would need tenants. Thank you. But
In case tenants are
the,
interested.
yeah, the bigger thing is going to be how do they do in their semi-quinquennial inspection? That's 2.5 years.
Mhm. And
Because a concern that I have with the inspections is if enough issues are found, it, when would plans start to be made for tenant displacement, whether it's from the building or from their particular unit while repairs are being made?
I, I'm not going to speak on, the building department's behalf. I don't,
Mhm.
if they've got a C of C and a C of O, then they've got that. So, I don't know what building that would be driven by the building department and how safe or unsafe they think the units are.
And then John, just to close the loop on Sheila's question, also there wouldn't be anything in the report that you're planning to send back to us that would be confidential in any way, right?
No, I'd have to check with on appropriate redactions.
Thank you.
And as for the security, from the information that I got from the tenant association, they had reached an agreement with management to shift security to nighttime instead of daytime. When was this like last update that they've kept it to daytime, decided not to continue with night?
And that was a non-agreement with the city, by the way. So that's not something we're going to monitor because that's not
Yeah,
we enforce the code. So we're not, it's not the code that you have to have cameras. It's not code that you have to have security. So,
yeah.
so, so
I guess I'm just
I,
wondering when your last interaction with them was.
I
Just
have never interacted with them. Pete has.
okay.
And we can only enforce the code. We can't, that's the problem. Like I know the fire things came up too, like fire extinguishers. If they're not code, we can't enforce that.
You said that there were a number of fires that were intentionally set. Through, was that by an outside, like, was it by a non-tenant or?
They suspected a tenant.
Okay.
And I think that's also part of why they wanted cameras. To thwart it or to catch it.
Okay. Um, Moving forward, I don't have any, was it a report from commissioners? Do any of the other commissioners have any reports or announcements? Then we'll go ahead and move forward to the report from our staff liaison, Kristen.
No report. I will put together those question forms and send them out kind of along with an update. There's a few things to follow up on from this meeting, so I'll do that either tonight or by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and do the second general public comment.
All right, there are no attendees in the meeting other than those promoted as panelists, you guys, so we can close public comment.
Okay, then we'll move forward to the communications to the Renters Commission. The first one was about the green rental housing ordinance. It appeared that it was from a landlord who was upset about going through I think they did the HERS assessment. They passed. I couldn't tell if they were saying that they just refused to do a HERS assessment again, or if they were questioning if a HERS assessment has to be done again. And they also asked for, I think, property taxes for people over 60 to be capped, even if they sell and buy a new home, to have a capped property tax, which I don't think really has anything to do with the renters commission. There was an issue, the next one had to do with additional charges that a tenant was told they had to pay. I was a little confused because I kind of just skimmed before the meeting, but it sounded like the tenant received a notice that, there was it like March 30. It sounded like they didn't receive their bill until March 31st. And then April, like I think April 1st, they were yeah, it says the system experienced a delay in reflecting the utility charges due April 1st. The charges were not posted until the evening of March 31st. So right before the night before the charges were due. And then the person was charged a $100 late fee. The vice president of operations applied a credit, they said as a one-time courtesy. I kind of have a question, I think, for John Reiser about this because there's not a lot of details in the email, but it's also getting pretty late. But if if you're late getting your utility notice about like how much you owe, and then it's due April 1st, if you pay like then and it's due the next day, should you be charged a late fee?
No, I'm not going to comment. I don't know that I don't know that the city regulates that. And it might be
Okay,
it
that's what
might
I
be
was
a,
at.
I think that's a function of the lease and what the lease says.
Mhm.
We don't, we don't get involved in whether a lease is fair or whether, fees are assessed outside of the application fees, waitlist fees, and tenancy fees, things like that. So, is it a tenancy fee that's not reasonably avoided? That's possible, right? Given what our ordinance says about that.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. Something to think about for a later meeting. I know you can't because again, we don't have all the details either about what's in their lease. Um, and then so the last one um had something to do with a uh is it someone who has a housing voucher and a lease renewal. I did not get a chance to read this beforehand.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull
So
up.
I just urge everyone. What,
Oh,
Kristen?
I was asking if you wanted me to share my screen, but sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it sounds like it's possibly it was getting resolved, or is resolved. So I'll leave it at that and just encourage the rest of the commissioners to go and have a look. Um, and that's the end of communications, and I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Um, Kristen will be in touch about the work plan meeting and seeing if we can invite someone from building rental inspection services. Have a good rest of the month and see you guys in May.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.